The harsh, chemical smell of bleach was the first thing that hit my senses. I opened my eyes slowly, squinting against the blinding white fluorescent lights above me. My head throbbed with a dull, heavy ache. "Mr. Vance? You're awake," a nurse shouted from across the room, her footsteps rushing closer. "How long?" I wheezed, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "How long have I been here?" "2 months, Ethan," she said softly, adjusting my foreline. "You were in a horrible car crash. It's a miracle you woke up." 2 months. My heart raced as I pushed myself up in bed. "Where is Chloe? Where is my fiancée?" "She hasn't been here in weeks," the nurse replied nervously, avoiding my eyes. "She left a document for you on the nightstand." I reached out with trembling hands and picked up the thick white envelope. My name was printed on the front, but the contents inside made my blood run cold. It was an official corporate notice from Vance and Sterling Tech, signed by Chloe Sterling herself. "Dear Ethan Vance, due to your prolonged absence and severe physical trauma, the board of directors has voted to remove you as co-CEO. Effective immediately, your position will be downgraded to junior desk researcher." "This has to be a mistake," I whispered, gripping the paper so hard it crumpled in my fist. "I built this company from my garage. She wouldn't do this." "Sir, you need to lie back down," the nurse warned as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. "No," I growled, my chest heaving with anger. "I need to go to my office. Right now." My legs felt like lead and every step sent sharp pain through my chest, but rage kept me moving. I ripped off my heart monitor, pulled the 4-needle from my arm, and threw on my jacket over my faded hospital gown. I shuffled past the shocked nurses, burst through the front doors into the rainy Seattle afternoon, and flagged down a yellow taxi cab. "Vance and Sterling Tower," I told the driver, my hands trembling against my knees. "And drive fast." 20 minutes later, I slammed open the glass doors of my headquarters. The receptionist's jaw dropped when she saw me standing in the lobby, pale, hollow-eyed, and limping. "Mr. Vance," she gasped. You shouldn't be here." "Where is Chloe?" I demanded, ignoring her stare. "She's in the top floor corner office," she stuttered, pointing toward the elevators. "With the board." I didn't wait. I marched into the private elevator, slammed the button for the 70th floor, and watched the digital floor numbers climb. When the doors slid open, I pushed past 2 bewildered security guards and kicked open the double doors to my corner office. Chloe was standing behind my mahogany desk, holding a glass of champagne. She looked stunning, wearing an expensive silk suit, completely unbothered by my sudden reappearance. Standing right beside her was Julian Vance, my half-brother, dressed in a custom-tailored designer suit. "Ethan," Chloe said smoothly, setting her glass down without a flinch. "You look horrible. You really should still be in a hospital bed." "What is the meaning of this letter, Chloe?" I shouted, slamming the paper onto my desk. "You demoted me? While I was in a coma?" "It was a business decision, Ethan," she replied, her voice cold and completely devoid of love. "The company was falling apart without leadership. We couldn't wait around for you to wake up, if you ever did. I am the co-founder," I yelled, stepping closer. "I wrote the core code for this entire firm. You can't just toss me aside like trash." Julian stepped forward, putting a hand in his pocket and smiling smugly. "Calm down, brother. You suffered severe brain trauma. You aren't mentally fit to run a billion-dollar company anymore. The board agreed with us." I stared at him in disbelief. "Julian? What are you even doing here?" "Julian is our new vice president of product," Chloe announced proudly, resting her hand on Julian's shoulder. "He has taken over all of your old responsibilities. He doesn't know a single line of code." I hissed, glaring at my half-brother. "He's going to destroy everything I built." "He has dynamic vision, Ethan, something you lack," Chloe sneered, stepping around the desk to stand directly in front of me. "Look at yourself. You are unstable. You're wearing hospital clothes and screaming in my office. Be grateful I didn't terminate you entirely." "Grateful?" I laughed bitterly, tears of rage burning my eyes. "I trusted you. I loved you. We were supposed to get married next month." "Business is business, Ethan," she said, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "You are no longer fit to lead. If you want to keep receiving a paycheck to cover your medical bills, you will take the junior researcher position in the basement. Otherwise, I will have security throw you out on the street." "You won't get away with this," I whispered, my teeth grinding together. "I already have," Chloe replied coldly. "Now get out of my office." I looked at Julian, who gave me a mock salute, and then at Chloe, the woman I had planned to spend my life with. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces, but deep inside the ashes, a new flame ignited. They thought I was weak. They thought I was broken. Fine, I said, straightening my back despite the excruciating pain in my body. I'll take the basement office. Good boy, Chloe smirked. I turned around and walked out. They took my title, my office, and my dignity, but they made one giant mistake. They left me inside the building. And I was going to burn their empire to the ground. The basement smells of stale coffee, old paper, and damp concrete. A single fluorescent light hums directly over my new desk, a metal folding table tucked into the darkest corner of the sub-level office. Hey look guys. The former CEO is actually working. I don't look up from my flickering monitor. Kevin, a junior developer hired while I was in my coma, leans against my cubicle wall with a smirk on his face. 2 other interns snicker behind him. Did you finish sorting those database spreadsheets, Ethan? Kevin asks, tapping his pen on my desk. Chloe said if you don't speed up, she'll dock your minimum wage pay. I finished them an hour ago, Kevin, I say calmly, keeping my gaze locked on the screen. And it's Mr. Vance to you. Kevin chuckles, crossing his arms. Not anymore, buddy. Julian Vance is my boss now. He's running the show upstairs. You're just the broken guy who couldn't keep his hands on the wheel. Get back to your desk, I reply softly, my chest tightening with suppressed anger. Before you regret it. Whatever, crazy old man, Kevin laughs, walking away with his friends. Don't break your brain thinking too hard. I grip the edge of my desk until my knuckles turn ghost white. 2 months ago these kids wouldn't have dared to look me in the eye. Now I am the company joke. But I need to stay right here. Moving back into this building is the only way I can figure out how Chloe and Julian pulled off this hostile takeover. Ethan? A low, cautious voice whispers from behind the row of tall filing cabinets. I turn around. Marcus. Marcus Lee, our chief financial officer and my trusted friend for 7 years, steps into the shadows of my cubicle. He glances nervously over his shoulder toward the stairwell before pulling up a plastic chair. Are you insane? Marcus whispers loudly, his eyes wide with anxiety. What are you doing down here, Ethan? You should be recovering at home. I need to know what happened, Marcus, I say, leaning in close. How did Chloe get the board to sign off on my demotion? Marcus sighs, rubbing his temples tiredly. She played dirty, Ethan. She convinced everyone that your brain injury left you permanently impaired. She forged medical reports while you were unconscious. She forged them? My blood boils. And the board just believed her? She had help, Marcus says, lowering his voice even further. From Julian. Julian doesn't have the brains to forge a medical document, I say bitterly. He can barely read a balance sheet. That's not all, Marcus says, looking around again to make sure no one is listening. They aren't just taking your company, Ethan. They've been sleeping together behind your back for 6 months. The room feels like it's spinning. The air leaves my lungs all at once as if someone just kicked me in the chest. What did you just say? Chloe and Julian, Marcus says, his face filled with genuine pity. It started long before your accident. I caught them together in the executive lounge 3 weeks after you went into the coma. They've been planning this for a long time. 6 months? I whisper, my voice cracking under the sudden weight of the painful truth. She was lying in my bed every night, promising to marry me, while sleeping with my half-brother? I'm so sorry, Ethan, Marcus says softly. I wanted to tell you, but Chloe threatened to fire me if I spoke up. She controlled everything while you were gone. I press my palms against my eyes, feeling a single hot tear burn down my cheek. The betrayal cuts deeper than the physical pain from my car crash. The woman I adored and the brother I helped raise were tearing my life apart together. Why? I breathe out, looking up at Marcus. Why give him my position? Julian knows nothing about tech. Because Julian is easy to control, Marcus replies. And because of the patent. I freeze. My neural network algorithm? Yes, Marcus nods grimly. Julian signed an agreement yesterday to sell your core patent to an offshore buyer for $80 million. They plan to split the money under the table and bankrupt Vance and Sterling before anyone realizes the core tech is gone. They're liquidating my life's work for fast cash? I ask, my shock instantly hardening into pure, unadulterated rage. Exactly. The deal closes at the end of the week, Marcus says, handing me a small black USB flash drive. I backed up the transfer records and their private email chains on this. If they sell that patent, this company goes bankrupt in 3 months and you get left with nothing. I stare at the drive sitting in my hand. The stinging grief inside me evaporates, replaced by a cold, sharp, crystal-clear focus. Crying won't give me my life back. Pain won't stop them. Only strategic retaliation will. Marcus, I say, my voice steadying. Is David Miller still head of the audit committee on the board? Yes, but he thinks you're incompetent because of Chloe's fake medical records. We can fix that, I say, closing my fingers tightly around the flash drive. Does my grandmother still hold her trustee voting rights? Marcus's eyes widen. Madam Eleanor? Ethan, she hasn't set foot in the corporate headquarters in 5 years. She's completely retired. She hates thieves more than she loves retirement, I reply with a dark, bitter smile. And Julian is still her grandson. She needs to know what he's doing to this family. What are you going to do? Marcus asks nervously. I'm going to let Julian hang himself first, I whisper, standing up from my folding chair. He doesn't know how the core code works. When he tries to show it off to the investors, it's going to crash. And when it does, I'll be ready. Ethan, Marcus warns, Chloe is ruthless. If she catches you planning a comeback, she'll ruin you completely. Let her try, I say, sliding the flash drive into my pocket. She took my title, my money, and my trust. Now I'm going to take her entire world. The main conference room on the high-tech floor was packed with our most important venture capitalists. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling glass, illuminating Julian as he stood at the head of the long mahogany table. He wore a crisp Italian suit, adjusting his tie with an arrogant smirk. Chloe stood beside him, her arms crossed, radiating supreme confidence. I stood in the far back corner of the room in my plain, rumpled clothes, holding a stack of extra printed reports. To the investors, I was just a low-level desk researcher serving coffee and handing out papers. Welcome everyone, Julian announced, pressing a button on the presentation remote. The massive wall screen lit up with the glowing logo of our flagship AI platform Apex Core. Today, I am proud to present the groundbreaking update to our primary artificial intelligence software. A project I have spent countless late nights refining into a masterpiece. I narrowed my eyes. He hadn't written a single line of code in his life. I spent 2 solid years coding that neural architecture in my dark garage before I even met Chloe. David Miller, our most senior investor and board member, leaned forward, tapping his pen on the polished table. Julian, the board took a massive risk letting you replace Ethan as VP of Product. This platform is the backbone of our $50 million valuation. Are you absolute sure this live demo is stable? Rest assured, Mr. Miller, Chloe chimed in, stepping closer to Julian with a forced smile. Julian has completely overhauled the system. The speed metrics are double what Ethan previously achieved. Go ahead, Julian. Show them. Julian smirked, glancing back at me with triumph in his eyes. Watch and learn, brother, he whispered under his breath. He tapped the main command key to launch the live system demonstration. For 3 seconds, blue data streams flashed across the screen. Then a loud, high-pitched error ping echoed through the room speakers. The entire display froze, turning a bright, blinding crimson red. Critical system failure. Kernel memory leak. What is that? David Miller demanded, his brow furrowing as he pointed at the bright red screen. Is that a system crash? Julian's face went completely pale. His hands began to shake as he furiously clicked the remote control. No. It's just a small cache glitch. Hold on. He scrambled over to the master laptop, typing frantically on the keyboard. He was mashing keys completely at random, utterly clueless about how the back-end architecture actually functioned. The screen flashed again, displaying thousands of red lines of cascading corrupt code. Julian, fix it. Chloe hissed loudly, her icy composure instantly shattering into visible panic. What did you do? I don't know. Julian stammered, sweat breaking out across his forehead. The files aren't loading. The whole core logic gate is locked up. He bypassed the primary safety override. I spoke up calmly from the back corner, stepping forward just enough so my voice carried through the quiet room. He tried to force a double-thread execution without balancing the dynamic memory allocation. The entire server array just shut itself down to prevent a permanent meltdown. The entire room turned to look at me. Investors began whispering loudly among themselves. Ethan? David Miller sat up straight, his sharp eyes locking onto me. You know what went wrong? Of course he doesn't know. Chloe interjected, her voice sharp and frantic. She grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the laptop console. Ethan, shut your mouth and fix this right now. Type in your administrator bypass code. I pulled my arm out of her grip and stepped back, holding my hands up neutrally. I'm sorry, Chloe, but I can't do that. What do you mean you can't? She barked, her eyes wide with rage. I'm telling you as your boss to fix this system. Per official corporate policy, and the termination contract you personally signed 2 days ago, I am merely a low-level junior desk researcher. I stated clearly, ensuring every investor heard every single word. Junior researchers do not possess level 5 security clearance. Accessing the main servers without authorization is a federal corporate crime. I wouldn't want to break your rules. Ethan, this is not the time for your bitter games. Julian yelled, slamming his hand down hard on the table. Save the presentation or you're fired. Fire me then, I replied coldly, staring directly into his panicked eyes. But even if you do, you still won't know how to clear the pointer overflow. Because you didn't build this system, Julian. You don't even know what language it's written in. David Miller slammed his notebook shut, the loud noise echoing off the glass walls. Is this true, Chloe? Did Julian actually write this update, or did he just mess with Ethan's existing core software without knowing what he was doing? Of course Julian wrote it. Chloe lied desperately, her face turning bright red. Mr. Miller, please. Ethan sabotaged the server before the meeting. He deliberately coded a bug into the background files to make Julian look bad. He's mentally unstable. Sabotage? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. The system log clearly shows a forced manual override executed 10 minutes ago from Julian's private account. Check the timestamp yourself, Mr. Miller. David stood up, his face grim as he glared at Chloe and Julian. We came here today expecting to see a revolution in AI technology. Instead, we are watching a complete circus. The board will hear about this disaster within the hour. Mr. Miller, wait. Chloe pleaded, chasing him toward the glass exit doors. We can restart the servers in 10 minutes. Please. We're done here, Chloe, David said coldly, stepping out into the hallway as the rest of the wealthy investors followed him in disgusted silence. The heavy glass doors slammed shut. The room went completely silent except for the loud, rhythmic hum of the crashed server screen behind us. Julian slumped into a leather chair, holding his head in his shaking hands. Chloe turned on me like a rabid animal, her teeth clenching tightly together. You ruined us, she shrieked, pointing an angry, trembling finger at my face. You ruined everything. No, Chloe, I whispered, stepping closer to her desk and looking down into her terrified eyes. You ruined yourself the moment you thought you could run my company without me. The heavy oak doors of the Vance family estate opened without a sound. Marcus stepped inside first, double-checking the quiet hallway before motioning for me to follow. The grand house smelled of old mahogany, leather books, and sweet lavender tea. Is she waiting for us? I whispered, leaning on my cane as my weak leg throbbed with a dull ache. She's in the study, Marcus murmured back. David Miller arrived 10 minutes ago through the back gate. Nobody saw us. We walked down the long corridor toward the library. Sitting in a plush velvet armchair by the crackling fireplace was my grandmother, Eleanor Vance. Her sharp blue eyes instantly locked onto me. Across from her sat David Miller, holding a mug of dark coffee with a grim expression on his face. Ethan, Eleanor said, her aged voice carrying a command that made the room fall silent. Look at you. You look like a ghost. I'm alive, Grandma, I said softly, sitting down in the vacant chair across from her. Though Chloe and Julian wished otherwise. I heard what happened at the tech floor demonstration today, David Miller said, setting his cup on the saucer with a loud clink. It was an absolute disgrace, Ethan. Julian didn't know the first thing about your software. It gets much worse than a failed presentation, David, I said, pulling the black USB drive out of my jacket pocket and placing it on the glass table between us. Marcus helped me extract the internal financial ledgers from the main server before Julian locked me out. Eleanor leaned forward, resting her frail hands on her silver-topped cane. What is on that drive, my boy? Proof of grand theft, I answered, looking directly into my grandmother's eyes. Chloe and Julian haven't just demoted me. They have been secretly siphoning millions out of our corporate reserve accounts for the past 6 months. David picked up the flash drive and plugged it into his open tablet. He scrolled through the spreadsheets, his eyes widening with every second. Good Lord, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands? Over $12 million transferred in microtransactions. Julian had massive private gambling debts in Macau, Marcus added, stepping forward to point at the digital statements. Chloe covered them using company reserves. And now, they've signed a secret contract to sell Ethan's core neural network patent to a foreign firm for $80 million. They are selling our family's primary asset? Eleanor asked, her voice dropping into an icy, dangerous tone. Julian signed off on this? Yes, Grandma, I said softly, feeling a lingering pang of sadness for her. Julian betrayed us both. He sold out the family business just so he and Chloe could run away with $80 million. Eleanor closed her eyes for a long moment, taking a slow, heavy breath. When she opened them, the sorrow was gone, replaced by pure, blinding fury. I built this firm alongside your grandfather 40 years ago. I will not let a greedy girl and my foolish grandson tear it to pieces. We need to stop the patent sale before Friday, David said, slamming his tablet shut. Otherwise, the company goes into immediate bankruptcy. How many proxy votes do you control right now, David? I asked. Between myself and the institutional investors who were disgusted by today's crash, I control about 35%, David replied, calculating the numbers aloud. Chloe and Julian combined hold 40% thanks to your forged power of attorney. And I hold the remaining 25% in the Vance family trust, Eleanor stated, tapping her cane firmly against the hardwood floor. Which gives our alliance 60% of the total voting power. That is more than enough for a majority board vote, Marcus declared, a faint smile touching his lips. We can call an emergency session under Section 9 of the corporate bylaws. If we give them advance notice, Chloe will freeze the accounts and flee the country with the money, David warned. We have to strike fast. We won't give them a single second to react, I said, leaning forward as my blood surged with determination. We call an unannounced emergency board meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Chloe thinks she is holding a routine meeting to permanently seize my remaining stock options. She will walk into a trap, David smirked. She won't even know what hit her. Grandma, I turned to Eleanor, will you be able to come to the headquarters tomorrow? It will be painful to see Julian exposed like this. Eleanor stood up straight, her eyes bright with unyielding strength. Julian made his choice when he stole from his own blood, Ethan. I will be sitting right beside you in that boardroom. It is time to remind Chloe Sterling whose name is on the front of that building. Marcus, I said, turning to my friend. Make sure the security team locks down the main server room tonight. Nobody enters or leaves without my personal written consent. Consider it done, Ethan, Marcus nodded eagerly. What about Chloe and Julian? Let them celebrate tonight, I replied, a cold, sharp smile spreading across my face. Let them think they've won. Tomorrow morning, I take back everything they stole from me. The heavy glass doors of the 70th floor executive boardroom clicked shut. I sat quietly at the far end of the long glass table, dressed in a sharp black suit. Chloe strutted into the room, high heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. Julian followed right behind her, wearing a smug grin and holding a gold fountain pen. Look who decided to show up, Chloe sneered, tossing her leather folder onto the table. I see you managed to borrow a suit, Ethan. It won't save you. Good morning, Chloe. Good morning, Julian, I said calmly, lacing my fingers together. Let's speed this up, Julian said, dropping into an plush leather chair. We have a flight to catch this afternoon. We're here for one reason, to strip Ethan of his remaining stock options and remove him permanently from Vance and Sterling. Precisely, Chloe announced, looking around at the quiet board members. Ethan is mentally unequipped to hold equity in this company. His behavior yesterday proved he is a liability. I motion for an immediate vote to terminate his shares. Seconded, Julian added quickly, raising his hand. Let's vote. Not so fast, Chloe, David Miller said, stepping into the room from the side entrance. Chloe frowned, her eyebrows knitting together. David? What are you doing here? This is a private executive session. As the head of the board's governance committee, I have updated today's official agenda, David replied smoothly, sliding a stack of stamped legal documents across the table. Under Section 9 of our charter, an emergency shareholder motion takes absolute priority. What motion? Chloe snapped, her tone turning sharp. I am the CEO. I dictate the meeting agenda. You were the acting CEO, a powerful voice echoed from the doorway. Chloe and Julian whipped their heads around. My grandmother, Eleanor Vance, walked slowly into the boardroom, leaning heavily on her silver-topped cane. Marcus walked right beside her, carrying a leather briefcase. Julian gasped, his face draining of all color. Grandma? What are you doing out of the house? I am here to clean up your mess, Julian, Eleanor said coldly, taking her seat at the head of the table. Sit down and close your mouth. This is ridiculous. Chloe shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Eleanor, you retired 5 years ago. You don't have the authority to disrupt this meeting. I hold 25% of the voting equity through the Vance Family Trust, Chloe, Eleanor stated, her voice like steel. And together with David Miller and our institutional partners, we represent a 60% supermajority. Supermajority for what? Julian stammered, sweat breaking out on his neck. For an immediate vote of no confidence in your leadership, David announced loudly, addressing the entire room. We have uncovered definitive proof that Chloe Sterling and Julian Vance have embezzled over $12 million in corporate funds to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Gasps erupted around the table. Board members began muttering in shock, glaring at Chloe. That's a lie. Chloe shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. Ethan forged those numbers. He's trying to frame us because he's bitter. The paper trail bears your personal digital signatures, Chloe, Marcus chimed in, opening his briefcase and laying out thick stacks of bank audits. And we also intercepted the illegal contract you signed to sell Ethan's core software patent to a foreign entity. You backed up the server records? Julian whispered, staring at Marcus in complete horror. Every single byte, Marcus replied with a tight smile. David Miller raised his hand, restoring silence in the room. We will now hold a formal vote on Board Motion 402. First, the immediate termination of Chloe Sterling as Chief Executive Officer, and the immediate firing of Julian Vance. You can't do this to me. Chloe screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. I built this brand image. I saved this firm. All those in favor of termination? David called out. Every single hand around the massive table raised into the air, including Eleanor's and David's. 60% of the company's power stood firmly against them. The motion passes, David declared. Chloe Sterling and Julian Vance are hereby stripped of all executive authority, effective immediately. Chloe stood frozen, her jaw hanging open, her face completely pale. No, this isn't happening. Second motion, David continued, turning his eyes toward me with a respectful nod. To elect Ethan Vance as the new chairman of the board and chief executive officer with total voting control over all corporate operations. All those in favor? Once again, every hand in the room shot up. Motion passed unanimously, David said, smiling broadly. Congratulations, Chairman Vance. I stood up slowly, picking up my cane, and walked around the table until I was standing directly in front of Chloe and Julian. The power dynamic had completely inverted. I was no longer the broken man in the hospital bed, nor was I the forgotten researcher in the dark basement. This is my company, I said, my voice quiet, calm, and filled with absolute authority. I built it line by line and I just took it back. Ethan, please, Julian whimpered, his confidence entirely shattered as he grabbed my sleeve. We're family. I was tricked. Chloe made me do it. Don't touch me, Julian, I said, cold disgust washing over me as I brushed his hand off my suit. You threw away our family bond for money and greed. Chloe stared at me, tears of anger and fear welling in her eyes. Ethan, you loved me. We were going to get married. You can't destroy me like this. I loved the woman I thought you were, I replied softly, looking into her terrified eyes. But that woman never existed. You are just a thief. I turned toward the back doors, where 4 armed security officers were already waiting. Escort these 2 off the premises, I ordered firmly. And hand all of Marcus's financial records directly to the police. The 2 security guards stepped forward, grabbing Chloe and Julian tightly by their arms. Get your filthy hands off me. Chloe shrieked, kicking wildly as she was dragged backward toward the boardroom doors. Ethan, tell them to let me go. You can't do this to me. Take them down to the security holding office, I said, my voice completely steady. The fraud investigators from the city police will be here in 20 minutes. Ethan, brother, please? Julian sobbed, his face red and blotchy with frantic tears as he struggled against the guard's grip. Don't let them arrest me. Chloe manipulated me, I swear. She came up with the entire plan. She told me you were never going to wake up from that coma. I slowly walked toward my half-brother, stopping just inches from his shaking frame. You had a choice, Julian. You were my brother and you sold me out for pocket change. I was stupid. I was broke. Julian pleaded desperately. I'll give back every single cent. I'll leave the country and never come back. Just don't send me to prison. You should have thought about prison before you forged my signature, I said coldly. I turned my back on him, waving my hand toward the exit. Get him out of my sight. Ethan, no. Julian screamed as the heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off his frantic cries. I followed the guards down to the marble lobby on the ground floor. News reporters and company employees had already gathered in the grand atrium, whispering as Chloe was escorted toward the front glass doors. When she saw me step out of the private elevator, she broke free from the guard's grip and threw herself at my feet, collapsing onto the polished floor. "Ethan, look at me," she wept out loud, tears running down her makeup-stained face. "Remember everything we built together? Remember our wedding plans? We loved each other for 5 years." I stood above her, feeling no anger left inside me, only a hollow, quiet disappointment. The woman I loved would never have demoted me while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed. "I made a mistake," she sobbed, reaching out to clutch the bottom of my trousers. "I was scared. The pressure of running the company got to me. I let Julian manipulate my mind. Please, Ethan, give me one more chance. I'll do anything. I'll work in the basement." "No, Chloe," I said, stepping back so her hand slid off my shoe. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a calculation. You thought I was weak, broken, and useless. You ruined your own life the second you let your greed blind you. You're a monster," she spat out suddenly, her weeping turning into venomous rage. "I made you who you are. You're nothing without me." "Security," I called out calmly. "Hand her over to the officers waiting outside. You'll regret this, Ethan." Chloe screamed as the officers handcuffed her wrists in full view of the flashing news cameras. "You'll regret this." I watched in silence as the police cruiser pulled away into the rainy city street, carrying Chloe and Julian away to face trial for grand theft, corporate fraud, and embezzlement. The circus was finally over. The poison in my life was gone. 6 months later. The morning sun broke through the cloudy Seattle skyline, casting golden light across the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my top-floor executive office. I stood by the glass, holding a warm cup of black coffee, watching the city wake up far below me. My leg had fully healed and I no longer needed my wooden cane to walk. The heavy oak doors behind me clicked open softly. Marcus stepped into the room, holding a leather folder packed with official financial printouts. "Morning, Mr. Chairman," Marcus said with a bright, proud smile. "The quarterly reports just came in from the audit team. How are the numbers looking, Marcus?" I asked, turning around to face him. "Better than ever," Marcus replied enthusiastically, handing me the top page. "Our core software update launched last week without a single glitch. Investor confidence is at an all-time high, and our stock price just hit a historic record of $200 a share." "And the trial?" I asked softly, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Chloe was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison yesterday morning," Marcus reported grimly. "Julian took a plea deal for 5 years. Neither of them will ever step foot near a corporate board again." "Good," I murmured, signing my signature at the bottom of the audit sheet and handing it back to him. "They earned every single day of that sentence. The whole board is waiting for you in the conference room for the annual kickoff meeting," Marcus said, stepping back toward the doorway. "Are you ready, Ethan?" "I've been ready for a long time, Marcus," I smiled genuinely. "Tell them I'll be there in 2 minutes." As Marcus left the room, I turned back toward the massive glass window. I looked at my reflection in the clean pane. No longer pale, no longer broken, and no longer betrayed. I had lost my health, my fiancée, and my brother in a single night. But standing here today as the true chairman of my own destiny, I knew I had gained something far more valuable: absolute freedom, unshakable strength, and total peace in my heart. I took one last deep breath of the cool morning air, squared my shoulders, and walked out the door to claim my future.